Number 5 on this list is Jennifer PEREZ. Jennifer is currently on, I think, what a lot of people would describe as a good path, but it wasn't always that way. For a while there, Jen was going down a really bad path. Drugs and alcohol and depression, they ran her life, and things, they weren't looking too bright for Jennifer. In fact, it got so bad that one evening in the early 2000s, her body couldn't hold up anymore. And she died. It was in that time of death that she visited hell and saw the actual devil. Now, it didn't start out like that. Apparently her heart stopped and the first place she went was heaven. However, she wasn't allowed into heaven. The way she ran her life and the neglect that she had shown to her relationships was not going to grant her passageway. So they sent her down to hell. It was a horrible place, she said. As she fell from heaven's gates, it got hotter and hotter and hotter. The heat was unbearable and the air was filled with an intense smell of sulfur. Then she saw the people. Thousands upon thousands of them getting brutally tortured by all kinds of demons in all kinds of horrific fashions. And at the heart of it all, a massive red creature who she assumed must have been the devil. Eyes glaring, watching over all of it, almost like the way Sauron watches over things in The Lord of the Rings. Before she hit the hot hellish ground though, she woke up. She was revived, and her life was saved. From that point on, she has completely changed her way of life and tried to do everything in her power to never end up in that horrible place again with the devil watching over all of it. I imagine that if I ever saw the devil up close and personal like that, I might change my way of living as well. Number 4 on this list is KALPIN. KALPIN is a Reddit user who believes that several years ago they saw a demon, or maybe even the devil, in their own home. They write, "When I was about 17, I woke up in the middle of the night thirsty and I went into the kitchen to get some water. When I walked into the kitchen and flipped on the light, I saw what I can only describe as a large golem-looking creature. It looked me in the face and then screeched, a noise I will never forget, and then crawled on the walls into the unlit part of the house. Well, I wasn't sleeping or dreaming. I ran into my room and turned on music and did not sleep the rest of the night. I've only told a handful of people about it, and yes, I'm completely serious." I've never heard of the devil as being a golem creature, but it's certainly not impossible. What the devil would have been doing in your home, clutching your ceiling in the middle of the night, now, that's a better question. Personally, this probably rings closer to a demon than the actual devil himself. No disrespect to KALPIN here, but unless there is something particularly special about him, his family, or his home, then I don't really see why the devil would have been there. But then again, why is the devil doing anything that he's doing? Why would a demon have been there? There are a lot of questions involved in this story, and obviously Sim wasn't in a position to be able to ask when he ran into this thing at the time. At least it stayed in the kitchen and didn't follow him upstairs. Number 3 on this list is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was a very real dude, and he definitely lived one heck of a life. Now, he may not have actually seen the devil necessarily, but he definitely saw hell and all of its horrible details. There's a text called the Apocalypse of Peter that is written by the disciple Peter and describes the divine visions that Christ had of hell. Wikipedia says, the work details both heavenly bliss for the saved and infernal punishments for the damned. In particular, the punishments are graphically described in a physical sense and generally correspond to lex talones. Blasphemers are hung by their tongues, liars who bear false witness have their tongues set on fire eternally, callous rich people are made to wear rags and be pierced by sharp stones as would beggars, and so on. Yeah, so even though Jesus didn't necessarily see the devil, he saw what the devil was up to, and none of it's pretty good. I don't know about you folks, but I like my tongue the temperature that it's currently at, and having it lit on fire for eternity doesn't really sound like the best way to spend my time. It's no wonder Jesus preached so much about love and God and everything. My dude literally saw what was going to happen to all of us if we didn't do any of that. Jesus straight up knew that the devil was just waiting for the moment your soul passed over to hang you by your tongue and torture you forever. Number 2 on this list is Patrick Antle. Patrick had a horrifying encounter with a demon several years back when he was 17. He's 23 now, but it's taken him that long to even speak about the event that transpired. At the time, he lived with his parents in Cincinnati. One evening, Patrick decided to sneak out and go to a local high school party. The sneaking out process worked out fine and he made it to the party safely. It was on his way back though that he had the scariest moment of his life. He was walking back the way he came to go back home a little bit past 2 a.m. The area that he was in was rural and there weren't too many houses that he passed by. However, when he turned down the second last street before his own, he saw a house on the side of the road. It's a house. This shouldn't be anything serious, but what struck him as being weird was that he'd never seen that house before. Now, Patrick had been drinking a little bit that evening, so he just chalked it up to being a little bit drunk and kept walking down the street. When he was passing right in front of this house though, he stopped and glanced at it and noticed the garage door was open. Only a few seconds had passed when out of the darkness of the garage door, two red glowing eyes appeared in the night. His body immediately froze, and even though his mind was telling him to run, his limbs didn't want to cooperate. Standing stuck in the middle of the road, paralyzed, Patrick got struck with an overwhelming fear that his life might end right there, right then. The eyes dug into his skull and felt as if they were infiltrating his soul. Then he heard a voice. A voice that wasn't coming from the garage, but one that was actually coming right out of his own head. The voice was a deep, guttural snarl that said, "Turn away now or your body will burn in the deep fires of hell and your soul will be tormented for eternity." The message ended and his body hit the ground. He didn't take any time to think about what had happened, but just got up, ran home as fast as he could. It took him several weeks to work up the courage, but eventually he went back to that road and saw that the house that he had seen that evening wasn't there anymore. To this day, he has no idea what happened to him or who that was, but he believes that there is a really strong possibility that he encountered the devil and for some reason, it decided to let him live. And finally, number 1 on this list is Sister Josefa Menendez. Born in 1890 and only living 33 years, Sister Josefa Menendez saw her fair share of hell. She was constantly bombarded with visions of hell and the devil himself. So much so that she wrote about this in a book called The Way of Divine Love. The purpose of the book was to lead people away from hell and the devil, but writing it must have been difficult because she would have ran into Satan himself way too many times. Eternally burning fire and dark, never-ending corridors. That's what she saw hell to be filled with. All the souls and people who were sent there, the devil would suck the capability of love and compassion from them so that they could no longer feel any positive emotions at all. It was just depression and grief for those that got sent here. The devil was a dark creature in her visions who would eat these happy emotions up but not feel any of them himself. She saw these visions and warned us about them so that we wouldn't have to see them. I recommend heeding her warning.
Coming in at number 5, Michael Taylor. It's 1974, Yorkshire, England. Michael Taylor, age 31, father of 5 and husband to Christine Taylor. Michael was a well-mannered and caring father and husband. Michael, like anyone, became depressed from a back injury, left him short on work and seeming a little odd and off. After seeking religious advice and a one-on-one session at a local church, Michael started having outbursts and acting aggressively. Puzzled, he sought one-on-one sessions which turned ugly. After apparently changing form and attacking Marie, a young religious leader helping Taylor and unable to remember anything, Michael and the church agreed that an exorcism was necessary. Father Peter Vincent and Reverend Raymond Smith met at St. Thomas and started. It got so violent, he was tied to the church floor. After hours in the middle of the night, the two had managed to exorcise more than 40 demons out of Michael, in which appeared around them as they exited. Violence continued, leaving only 3 demons remaining for the next day. After returning home from the first session, Michael was found now only hours later, naked, in the middle of the street, covered head to toe in blood. Michael had returned home, to which then his wife and family dog lay dead as the police arrived in the AM. His wife, missing her eyes, tongue, and skin from the front of her skull. The dog, torn limb from limb and spread around the home. He was arrested soon after for the death of his wife. Michael had this to say about his late wife in court, quote, "I am released. I am released. It is done. The evil in her has been destroyed." Yeah, that was definitely a vessel for him. He was acquitted on psychological conditions and jury found that he met his breaking point during the exorcism that night. He was acquitted on insanity and remained in and out of facilities until he passed in 2013. Number 4, David Berkowitz. New York, 1976, and the police were busy on the search for a man shooting couples in the New York area, which had started to become a citywide phenomenon that summer. Brunette women with long hair frantically cut and dyed their hair blonde in fear. The .44 caliber killer was the title the press gave David in his earliest of assaults. After losing his job, David began to experience psychotic episodes and claimed that his neighbor's German Shepherd had begun talking to him and eventually explained to David that he was a demon. He took the name after the pet's owner, Sam. It was this dog who ordered the killings by David and claims that the pet coaxed David into killing. David used this summer to shoot 8 people, resulting in 6 lives and the stabbings of 2 others. Using his .44 caliber bulldog revolver, David sent police on a wild goose chase around New York City with handwritten letters, David mocking the detectives with cryptic messages. Some of them explain who Sam is, and some of them explain what Sam does. Some mock police, saying that they are never going to find or stop him. David was finally arrested just hours before his next planned victim's visit. He applauded police in their ability to stop him, in the back seat of the car, laughing and cheering. Although David pleaded not guilty to insanity and pleaded guilty, expressing that he was coaxed by the demon and that it demanded him to kill for hell, he was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences with parole after 25 years. During the mid-90s, he amended his confession and claimed that he had been a member of a violent satanic cult that orchestrated the incidents as ritual murder and pleaded guilty to stabbing and attempting to murder others before the shootings had even begun. His letters are public and spine-chilling. Check them out. Real Riddler stuff. Quote, "I am the monster. I am Beelzebub. I am the chubby behemoth. Police, let me haunt you with this. I'll be back. I'll be back. Yours in murder, Mr. Monster." Okay, his violent spree led the legal system to create a new law called Son of Sam's Law, designed to create criminals from financially profiting from the publicity created by their crimes, which at the time, he was basically a celebrity. He remains in prison to this day. Number 3, Herbert Mullin. 1970s again. At the exact same time, in the same area, police had 2 serial killers to keep up with, Herbert Mullin and Edmund Kemper. No relationship to each other or each other's cases. Mullin was a paranoid schizophrenic in and out of mental health facilities in California during his teens. Mullin then kills 14 people during a 4-month period due to, quote, the impending natural disaster that would happen if he didn't. Mullin was convinced that the voice in his head he was hearing was telepathic. Mullin claims the voice of the Father had explained that the Vietnam War acted as a giant sacrifice that saved us from an earthquake and another one was coming soon. Constantly hearing the man's voice named the Father, encouraging him to gain more blood sacrifices, Mullin bludgeoned a man to death with a baseball bat. Mullin claims that the man was actually Jonah from the Bible and was begging him to sacrifice himself to Mullin. He then murdered a woman in the front seat of his car before dismembering her in a nearby park. Yeah, this is real satanic stuff, I told you. His 3rd victim, a priest that he was confessing to in a Catholic church. Mullin says the priest claims to have telepathically begged him to sacrifice his life for the cause. Mullin then killed 5 people in one day. He claims that all the victims telepathically begged to be sacrificed as a good deed to the Father. Herbert Mullin remains in custody, and who was the father who kept talking to him through all of these people? Number 2, Richard Ramirez. This next guy's really nasty and deserves to be in the 2nd spot. 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 11 assaults, and 14 burglaries. Sounds like a hell of a guy. The Night Stalker. Charming name for what this man did. Born in Texas, his older brother went to Vietnam and returned with some pretty gruesome stories and some pretty gruesome visuals. The young Ramirez, soaking all of this up, grows up obsessed with the satanic occult and fascinated. He made various references to Satan during his legal proceedings. His trial began in 1989 and he was convicted of 13 murders and a variety of other crimes. Nearly 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, with the judge stating that his crimes showed, quote, cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. And the worst part was that he made most of his victims pray to Satan and swear on Satan that they were going to tell him the truth, whatever he asked. I'm not really going to get into the sick details of really what this man did, nor will I with the number 1 spot, but it involved hammers, machetes, ropes, knives, guns, you name it, anything violent. He was an absolute nasty creature that liked to torture his victims and really drive the satanic love for you-know-who. First responders would have taken pictures of numerous satanic symbols drawn on the walls in almost a ritualistic reenactment. He was captured by the use of the huge media surrounding his story on the way to take his next victim's life. His trial was truly a disgusting display of media attention, one of the most expensive court cases to date, losing only to O.J. Simpson. He screamed "Hail Satan" at his hearing and flashed self-harm pentagrams. He died of cancer in 2013. This guy must have signed some sort of book for you-know-who. Coming in at number 1, Charles Manson. Okay, so most of us are all familiar with this man and his famous case amongst American pop culture. Ramirez was said to have been a copycat of this man, and I can see why with all the satanicness. California in the late 1960s. A criminal, musician, and a victim of LSD studies, Charles Manson would go on to start and lead the Manson family cult. A small religious group with unclear motives but lost souls and a ton of drugs, and a father to now a family. In summer 1969, some of the cult members committed murders in LA. Apparently Manson had ordered his followers to kill the people who had lived at the address he had given them for their initiation. The murder of actress Sharon Tate and 4 others in her home on August 8th and 9th, including the LaBiancas the next day. Another 2 victims. 4 members of the family committed the murders under Manson's instructions and satanic offering. Manson apparently heard voices that there was going to be a race war brought on by religious disputes, and that these killings were an offering to... who exactly? The famous helter-skelter message, incoherent scribbles, blood all over the walls. They were then to hide underground in, quote, the bottomless pit under Death Valley, which Manson knew the location of, but instead were caught on the run days later. Manson was sentenced to life in prison under the pretense that he was the one who targeted, planned, and brainwashed his, quote, piggies into committing. While in prison, Charles was diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoid delusion disorders, seeing visions and hearing voices for more than half of his life. He died in prison in 2017. Yeah, I've seen what Tarantino did with his latest movie, and it's definitely a subtle PG-13 fiction version of what actually went down on that night. What do you guys think? Do you think Charles saw the devil? I think he actually was the devil.
Number 5 on this list is Bill Wise. Now, it's unclear whether or not Bill saw the devil specifically, but he came pretty damn close. Bill is the writer of a book called 23 Minutes in Hell, which, as you guys can imagine, is his story of how he spent 23 minutes in hell. Wikipedia says Wise states that he had been a Christian since 1970 but had never studied hell before his experiences on the night of November 22nd, 1998. According to the book, Wise, then a real estate broker, found himself in a cell approximately 15 feet high and 10 feet by 15 feet in area where there were 2 foul-smelling beasts, personifications of evil and terror, who spoke in a blasphemous language. Wise says that the creatures had strength approximately 1,000 times greater than a man's strength. Wise states that he had heard the screams of the billions of damned people in hell. He states that he encountered Jesus, who told him to tell other people that hell is real. Wise states that his first experience ended with him lying on the floor of his living room screaming in horror. Pretty frightening experience, and one that's changed Bill's life forever. Number 4 on this list is Marcus Stanek. Marcus Stanek claims that he saw the devil for real when he was only 10 years old. Back in 1982, Marcus was only 10 and he lived out in a farm in Missouri. His quiet little farm lifestyle was pretty much anything a kid could want. Even though his family had him put in a lot of work to keep things going, he had acres upon acres to run and play and do everything that a growing kid should love to do. One afternoon, he was doing just that. A few kilometers from the main farm was a forest. He would often go here when he had a long time to play. In that forest was a stream that cut through, and by the stream, Marcus had built himself a little fort, something that he had been working on all that summer. When he got there that day, though, it wasn't how he left it. He arrived to his fort in a chipper spirit, but quickly realized something wasn't quite right. His fort was ravaged, completely destroyed. It looked like something big had come through here and purposely wrecked it. And weirdest of all, there was this black liquid, almost sludge-looking substance that was on the remnants of his fort. He began to investigate, but suddenly everything went extremely cold. The air grew thick and there was a massive presence that appeared. Roughly 10 feet in front of Marcus was a dark, shadowy creature with black robes on, levitating above the ground. Bright red eyes pointed out of its shadowy face. The second he made eye contact with the being, he was no longer in control of his actions. His body wasn't his anymore. He fought for a while and tried to resist, but his body couldn't hold up and he blacked out. He woke up to a flashlight in his face and his mother's frantic voice calling out to him. It was hours later and he had been laying in the forest completely out cold since the encounter. He told his family about it, but they didn't quite believe him. They thought it must have just been a big animal that had frightened him. Marcus always knew though. That day he had seen the devil in person, and for some reason, it had let him live. Number 3 on this list is The Vision of Tundale. The Vision of Tundale is actually a book that details the account of an Irish knight. This knight took a trip to hell for 2 days, and I can promise you aren't going to find his itinerary on TripAdvisor anytime soon. In his trip to hell, he discovered that the devil is clearly very hungry. The devil has it all laid out so that people are cooked into a stew. They're done so in many different ways, but the biggest method for cooking these humans is by throwing them into giant frying pans with hundreds of other humans and cooking them until they're burned to death. Think that's bad though? Well, it gets a lot worse, guys. There are demons that are constantly running around hell with the specific mission of harming and causing pain to the human souls. Killing them by cutting them into pieces and then using their powers to bring them back to life just so they can cut them into pieces again. It's brutal, and it's what this place is doing all the time. Then there's the actual devil himself, or what this Irish knight thinks could have been the devil. Acheron is this giant monster that eats thousands of humans at a time. He's so big that these humans just fall into the deep pit that's his stomach and then get eaten by other beasts that are down there. Vipers and creatures that live inside this devil's stomach and wait to feast on these humans. If Acheron truly is the devil, then I highly recommend enjoying your time on Earth, because what comes next doesn't sound like the best time, folks. Number 2 on this list is Anne Catherine Emmerich. Anne Catherine Emmerich was born in 1774 and died in 1824, and she had quite a rough life while she was alive. During her time on Earth, she was constantly riddled with visions of hell. She saw so much of what is to come to those that sin that it felt as if she was living in hell while she was on Earth. Apparently hell is similar to what we've conventionally drawn up, but it isn't exactly how we've pictured it. According to Anne, hell is a city. Not a pristine and beautiful one, of course, a burned down, disgusting city. Like a city that's just been through a horrible battle and all that stands are the ruins of it. Running through that city are also some swamps. These swamps are home to horrible creatures that are always hungry, and you and your soul, they're on the menu. The most notable creatures to live here are snakes. They will slither out of their swamps and attack those who are in the city, so you always have to be careful. People are always screaming and fire is always burning, but the loudest and most uncomfortable scream comes from the devil himself. Anne saw the devil, and he was chained up in the middle of the city. Yeah, that's right guys, apparently the devil himself is locked down here and screaming all the time to be set free. Which at this point, he might actually be. Anne said that she found evidence in her visions that the devil would be released upon the world of the living before the year 2000. Hate to break it to you guys, but it's currently 2022, so if Anne was telling the truth, then it's very possible the devil is already out and about. And finally, number 1 on this list is Father Gabriel Amorth. Father Gabriel Amorth, an expert when it comes to exorcisms, somebody with the capability of purging a demon over video chat, has come face to face with the devil. Being in the exorcism business means that you're going to be dealing with demons and devilish creatures pretty regularly. On one specific occasion, one that Father Gabriel Amorth will never be able to forget, he believes he saw the actual devil. The New York Post writes, in 1997, when a young, slim peasant man was escorted into the small room where Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome, the priest felt immediately confronted by evil. Amorth said he asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man began to curse and spit using English instead of his native Italian. Amorth bellowed, "Whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man fixed him with a glare and snarled, "I am Lucifer." It was obviously at this point where Father Gabriel Amorth knew he was dealing with something pretty serious. The post goes on to describe how, in return, the demon resumed his shrieks, making the possessed turn his head back and his eyes roll. He remained like this with his back arched for a quarter of an hour. As this continued, the room became extremely cold and ice crystals formed on the windows and the walls. As AMORTH continually commanded the demon to leave the host, the young man's body stiffened so much that he became hard and began to levitate. For several minutes, he remained hovering 3 feet in the air. Finally, the man dropped into a chair. AMORTH said he left for the day but continued to regularly visit the man and pray over him until he was met with no resistance. AMORTH died back in 2016, but during his life he had performed tens of thousands of exorcisms. This is a man who has seen it all when it comes to demons and anything from hell. The fact that this one exorcism sticks out to him as being the moment he knew he'd seen the devil makes me believe it to be true. That overwhelming sense of evil that the room was filled with, I can't imagine how that must have felt. Part of me wants to know just so I can experience it as well, but as the father would go on to describe, moments like this when you come face to face with evil as dark as that, it changes you as a person forever. It happened to him, and I imagine if you or I saw the devil in person, it would happen to us as well.